a lot of my research has been built on this Dorothy and Oz moment, seeing in color for the first time of, oh my gosh, literacy is not where it's at. It's actually plural. And this pluralization of literacies opens up these new conversations about how are they interconnected.
Voices of Innovation invites big thinkers with bold ideas to talk about the influence of technology in today's society. I'm your host, Lev Gonick, and we're recording today's episodes from the Agentic AI and the Student Experience Summit, a global gathering of over 600 education and industry leaders hosted by Arizona State University. Let's jump in. I am thrilled to introduce everybody to my friend and colleague, Angela Gunder, a proud Sun Devil alum. I need to throw in
That's
for
right.
everybody who'll be watching this.
Forks up.
Forks up. And but we're going to share some of your story, Angela, just to get to sort of one of the important conclusions here. We've just taken a moment to honor you as our inaugural AI Humanitarian Award recipient for 2025. And for us, that's really important, not only because we can honor a friend and a colleague, but also because it is a opportunity for us to actually hold a space that we think is extremely important when there's so much tech speak about what the objective is.
Yeah.
And the objective, at least for ASU, is not the race to AGI. It's to actually amplify student experiences, help them succeed. And there's no one better in helping frame through your own life experience and the work that you've led not only across the United States, but with UNESCO around the world in that journey well before the world woke up to AI. So I'm going to invite you, if it's all right, to take us back before the current moment to help sort of share what inspired you. What were some of the most important inspirations, whether those were people or experiences that help shape the way you look at the world?
Yeah, I love this question because it lets me brag on some amazing people who changed my life. And the first two that I'll talk about are my parents. So my dad, engineer, retired now, but also a famous Piedmont blues musician. And he's one of the last of that type of music to carry on the torch. Mom, a French and Portuguese professor, but also very, very famous in her own right in her career for being one of the early pioneers with digital learning for language acquisition. So I grew up in a house full of stories, songs, memories shared, and it was one of those places where you felt open to improvise, to play, to be really transparent. And learning was effortless. Like nothing was saved until it was perfect. Like if something was in flight, that was okay to be shared. So it created some interesting moments for me as I went through my own education, where I saw many educators who supported me. They were doing these same types of practices within the classroom. And then there was that tension when that wasn't available, when I felt like, oh my goodness, I don't feel like we're focusing on the content, or I'm not sure that this person actually cares whether I do well in this class or not.
Can I just ask,
Yeah.
From the beginning, it sounds like your interest, having grown up in a education environment, milieu, it may or may not have had anything to do with technology at that time.
It was very, very early on. So folks will call, I'm going to date myself, folks will call folks born in my generation as Zennials, but I love the Oregon Trail generation as the term because
You know the game, and that's what you grew up on.
We played the game. We played Carmen Sandiego and all of that good stuff. So we were at that early moment.
SimCity.
I was a SimCity player. I loved Sim Ant, too.
Sim Ant, sure, absolutely.
It was a violent game, though, for kids. I don't know if you remember that.
Well, I was into the SimCity version, using it as a teaching tool, actually.
Very, very good.
Turns out it's just a couple of years older than you.
Only a few. Right. So it really changed my perspective on how technology could be ubiquitous. I still go back and I tell people, and I've worked in instructional design and online learning for quite some time, for decades now. I tell people that the design of Carmen Sandiego is still some of the best instructional design that's there because you don't need a guide or a manual to get started. It's intuitive, but they have lots of support and help there for you that's differentiated and personalized. So throughout my career, I was thinking in that way of how can technology be ubiquitous? How can it be a support and an aid rather than an obstacle? And how can we acknowledge the fact that not everybody has access to these tools?
Was there an instructional designer inspiration along the way? Somebody whose framework of what instructional design, you were in that first generation in many ways of formal instructional design experience. Was there a mentor or somebody that inspired you?
I think, I keep on going back to this. There's not an event or a convening that I don't talk about backwards design.
Right.
When we think about backcasting, in fact, the work that we do within the 100-Year Ed Tech Project, where we're really focusing in on storytelling and imagining that ideal state for where we want to work backwards from, thinking about that utopia, and even taking the challenging stance of thinking about the dystopia that we don't want to live in, that we don't want to build, and backwards designing. That comes from good old Wiggins and McTeague and instructional design principles of we start with our learning outcomes and then we work from there.
That's terrific. And along the way, you've obviously found a way to take that formative experience and some of the tooling that you actually achieved in terms of your professional development, and turned it in a way that seems, at least to my mind, you've managed to find a way to open the aperture about the audiences and the engagements to communities that is, I almost want to say singular. Like, I don't know anyone else who kind of sort of sees the opportunity to really try to take all of that opportunity and insight and achieve at scale across all kinds of boundaries, especially for, as you were saying just a moment ago, learners who might not have advantage by their socioeconomic status or advantage for having been prepped for schooling. So was that an early inspiration for you to try to reach out to what we might call sort of the pursuit of digital inclusion and things of that sort?
So I started out working in the community college system. So that was very important to me, learning that non-traditional learners as a term needed to be eradicated, that all of us as learners come in not only with unique challenges, but with unique perspectives and experiences. So that definitely colored my my interests, my focus, and my passions. But I think for me, the biggest thing really was just looking at the world through this sociocultural lens of learning, and particularly understanding literacies, plural, as opposed to literacy as a binary. And I'll give you an example. When we talk about literacy within this country, quite often, we want to point out who is literate and who is illiterate. But within specific communities, certain literacies practices, and those can be skill sets and mindsets, are privileged over others. So a lot of my research has been built on this Dorothy and Oz moment, seeing in color for the first time of, oh my gosh, literacy is not where it's at. It's actually plural. And this pluralization of literacies opens up these new conversations about how are they interconnected, who gains power or privilege based on how we're assigning these literacies development.
You use the language of constellations.
I do.
frame to connect that, the concept of constellations, back to the multiple literacies piece of the way you think of framing.
Yeah.
Why we do what we do.
So I'm an old school bio kid. I love nature and science, and I spend a lot of time looking up at the stars. I live here in Phoenix, where we have a lot of clear, unpolluted sky that we can look up at the stars. And I always marvel at when you travel, when you go to other hemispheres, other parts of the world, and the constellations are completely different. We noticed this with literacies as well. So about 2 years ago, UNESCO engaged my collaboratory Open Culture in doing some work.
Just a second.
Yeah. And when we were talking to all sorts of different educators from all over the globe, we noticed that there were these patterns or these clusters of literacies that were appearing. We also noted that in addition to them being geographically located, they were temporal. So as time went by, as AI was evolving, we noticed that the clusters were changing in patterns. So we drew on this idea of constellations of AI literacies, but we also call them constellating AI literacies, both a noun and a verb, to show that this is in movement, this is socially negotiated, and it really depends on what community that you're a part of, which of these literacies are being prized and elevated.
So, what I know about your background is that obviously having spent many years inside the world of institutional education settings, You made a decision to spread your wings. I'd love to, whatever you want to share about sort of the epiphany or whatever it was. Maybe it was one of those Dorothy and Oz moments for yourself personally.
Spoiler alert, it was.
That led to ultimately the creation of the open culture, what is now a movement, but started off as obviously a practice.
Yeah, so my first foray into open education was actually through my mom. My mom was a big proponent of open ed. She was the first world languages editor for Merlot and did quite a bit with Merlot over the years.
One small little insert here.
Yep.
When Merlot was created in California, I happened to be the director in the chancellor's office in the Cal State that actually funded Merlot up at Sonoma State.
That's right.
Okay, that means I'm of your mother's generation.
I did know that. And I love that you gave that plug.
There we go.
Because it was folks like you that were thinking innovatively at the time. Folks were sort of dabbling within open, but they weren't thinking about it in terms of the people that were behind it. So Merlot was always about the community, not the objects that were created. And that actually was my own trajectory. When I first started to learn about open education, it was like a lot of people, open textbooks or OER. But as I moved along, I learned about open educational practices. I learned about remix. And when I decided to work on my dissertation, I ended up deciding to focus on open remix. I didn't see a lot of people engaging in remix, even though we were seeing within the literature that it was going to be incredibly impactful to folks, to open up education, to make it possible to bring culture, to bring belongingness into the classroom, but it wasn't happening. So at first, like most doctoral students, I said, well, I'm going to find the people that are doing remix the best, and I'm going to spotlight them.
Right.
But by the time I got to the point where I had to, actually solidify what my dissertation was going to be on, my chair said, are you still going to do it on this? And I said, nope. And she was so proud because I said, I need to actually go to the endemic inequities that exist. I need to go to the obstacles that exist and start to unpack why people were not engaging in remix, why people didn't feel like it was okay for them to be open. And through these global conversations that I had, I illuminated that there were some systemic barriers, including a big one that we see with AI right now. People don't think that they have the power or the privilege to use these tools, to shape these tools, and to determine what their outputs are.
So you've been a fierce advocate for that kind of human agency in periods before AI, and clearly that voice, that clarion voice, not only declaring that you can, you should, you must take human agency to help shape the destiny that we're all on together. Talk to me about kind of what is happening now in this AI moment in terms of people interested in your work and the work of the movement in terms of what open culture and AI and the remix moment.
Yeah, it's been pretty powerful and profound. We started asking questions of educators from all over the world. What competencies were they seeing their learners engaging in, their colleagues engaging in? What practices were going unrecognized or unspoken? And what we found was that there were interconnected skill sets and mindsets around AI usage that both had to do with what you needed to bring to the table to use AI, but what you were also gaining by using AI. And those conversations were particularly profound because for many folks, they might be dabbling with a particular practice and think, hey, it's no big deal that I'm using AI tools for different purposes than perhaps I'm being told they're out there for. Or I'm encouraging my students to experiment and play. When they interact with the work that we've done, which is built on the work of Dr. Doug Belshaw, who in 2012 wrote about digital literacies, about them being plural, socioculturally situated, and interconnected, our work became a remix of Doug's work. He's actually a good friend, so called him up and said, hey, we're seeing this within the literature. What you did, how many years ago sits in accord with what we're seeing now with AI literacies. And when we present folks with these 8 different dimensions, of which some of them certainly are skill sets, being able to construct and use the tools that are in front of you, but also mindsets of, I know I need to be critical about the outputs that are coming out from these tools, or I should be thinking about what societal good could be created by using these tools and situating them in the right ways and putting them in the hands of many who can promote many of our shared values and our goals. It was a natural progression for a lot of folks to understand, okay, AI is not just something that I need to react to. AI is something that I need to have a good deal of openness around, and understand that it's not a checklist, that there won't be a moment where we can say, okay, I'm AI literate, I've learned everything that I need to learn, and I'm all done. That's not going to happen. It's a commitment to that process and practice of ongoing learning.
Angela, just one more sort of big nugget to ask you to share and to comment on. You've been a co-founder and now co-lead of this project called the 100-Year EdTech Project, which in some ways takes your method, not only yours, but the method of backwards thinking, looking forward 50 years based on appreciation for 50 years in the past, and trying to understand, forecasting all kinds of future scenarios and future human needs that can be derived from those. Share a little bit about the 100-Year EdTech Project and how you see it unfolding and where you are most optimistic about it bringing value to future generations of people who are either going to be part of the movement that you've helped, or perhaps you'll be passing the torch on to them to create their own movements.
I love this question because it gives me the opportunity to talk about how I've been standing on the shoulders of giants once again, but also that the origins of the 100-Year EdTech Project were just a conversation, a group together. You were one of those folks in that room that were having that conversation about how can storytelling, how can narrative practices be a powerful tool for us to not only change minds and hearts around what we need to do for the future of EdTech, but also to bring people together into tangible action, generative action that can happen right now. I think we all can claim that we need something better in front of us for our learners, and we certainly need to be thinking about the future. But it can be incredibly deflating and feel like it's an impossibility to contribute to all of the challenges that we have in front of us. So,
say a little bit about some of the scenarios that, in fact, this group for now multiple sessions has both dreamed up scenarios that take us forward 10, 25, and even 50 years into the future. And what value do you see in actually those scenarios?
Yeah, so many of the scenarios that we are working with in the 100-Year EdTech Project, which is really truly a design sprint of folks from all different sectors. We have folks from industry. We have students working shoulder to shoulder with educators and leaders. We each choose either a utopian or a dystopian scenario to work backwards from. So we talk about climate change. We also talk about climate resilience. We talk about what the future of AI might be. AI as an overlord controlling us. How can we avoid that? But also making learning open and ubiquitous through the tools that are there within AI. All of these scenarios are crowdsourced by the community and then voted up. So it gives us the opportunity to make connections to the things that are present and now and real to the future that we want to build. And then we spend 2 days with a series of, I like to call them strategic moves, that we collectively brainstorm, ideate on, and then produce ultimately this blueprint that goes out as an open educational resource to educators for how we can build that reality that we want to see.
And we'll be back at UT San Antonio in the spring.
Super excited in February. Folks will get to celebrate pre-Valentine's Day with us, which is exciting for some. Yeah, put your heart hands up for that. But we'll also be thinking through what we've learned in the past 2 years of running this. Plus, there was a convening that got together in Ghost Ranch in New Mexico to really originate this idea. So we'll continue to look backwards as we look forwards, and all are welcome.
Fabulous. Angela, Gunder, thanks so much for joining us at ASU for this, I dare say, heartfelt expression of deep gratitude to you for everything that you've done so far in your career. And we look forward to celebrating many more amazing milestone accomplishments. And we're very thankful for your leadership in the open culture as well as helping us steer our 100-Year project. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Lev.